When World War I ended in 1918, the world believed it had survived the worst war in history. The fighting had stopped. The guns were silent, the empires were gone. But peace did not mean stability. In reality, the end of World War I did not solve the world's problems, it rearranged them. And in doing so, it created the conditions for an even greater catastrophe. This is why World War I made World War II inevitable. In 1919, the victorious powers gathered in Paris to decide the future of the world. They called it peace, but for many, it felt like punishment. The most important agreement was the Treaty of Versailles, imposed on Germany. Germany was blamed entirely for the war, forced to accept responsibility, forced to pay massive reparations. Its military was reduced to almost nothing. Its territory was cut apart. Millions of Germans suddenly found themselves living outside their own country. The treaty humiliated Germany, politically, economically, and psychologically. It did not reconcile Europe. It poisoned it. Germany's economy collapsed under the weight of reparations. Inflation spiraled out of control. Savings became worthless overnight. Unemployment soared. Too many Germans. Democracy became associated with weakness, chaos, and humiliation. The message was clear. Germany had lost the war, but had not been allowed dignity in defeat. This resentment did not fade. It waited. But Germany was not the only problem. Across Europe, the old empires were gone, replaced by new borders drawn by diplomats who often ignored history, culture, and ethnicity. New nations like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia were created overnight, containing multiple ethnic groups with conflicting identities. Minorities felt trapped. Borders were disputed. Nationalism intensified. The map of Europe looked peaceful on paper, but underneath, it was unstable and explosive. In Eastern Europe and the Middle East, the situation was even worse. Former Ottoman lands were divided into mandates controlled by Britain and France. Promises made during the war were broken. Local populations were excluded from decisions about their own future. These artificial borders planted long-term conflicts, many of which still exist today. World War I didn't just end empires. It replaced them with unresolved tensions. Meanwhile, the world failed to enforce true collective security. The League of Nations was created to prevent another war, but it had no real power. Key countries refused to join, others ignored its decisions. When aggression appeared in the 1930s, the League watched, but could not act. Peace depended on cooperation, but fear, resentment, and nationalism were stronger. Out of this broken world emerged radical ideologies. In Germany, anger and humiliation fueled extremism. In Italy, disappointment with the war's outcome led to fascism. In Eastern Europe, fear of instability strengthened authoritarian rule. The people who promised strength, revenge, and order gained support, not because they were peaceful, but because peace had failed. By the early 1930s, the consequences of World War I were impossible to ignore. The treaties had punished without healing. Borders had divided without stabilizing. Peace had been declared, but never secured. World War II did not begin in 1939 by accident. It began in 1919, in the treaties signed, in the borders drawn, in the resentment ignored. World War I ended the old world, but the new world it created was unstable, angry, and armed with unfinished business. The war to end all wars did not end war. It only delayed the next one.